My name is Mireya. I'm 33 years old. And this is the story of how my mother-in-law tried to erase my truth, and ended up losing everything she thought she controlled. It's hard to know where to begin when betrayal crawls in slow, in the shape of smiles and soft-voiced suggestions. If someone had asked me just a few months ago if I was happy, I would have nodded. I had the job I wanted, head of strategy at one of Portland's top advertising firms. I had just married Dean, the love of my life, or so I believed. And I was pregnant with our first child. But I didn't realize that the very people who were supposed to protect me would soon be the ones to push me, literally and figuratively, down the hardest staircase of my life. It started with a whisper of nausea and a missed period. I wasn't even thinking about pregnancy at first. I just figured I was overworked, stressed from a client campaign gone sideways. But something about that exhaustion, the kind that lives in your bones, felt unfamiliar. So, one rainy afternoon, I stopped at the pharmacy on my way home and bought a test. I didn't even wait to take off my shoes when I got back to our apartment. I shut the door, ran into the bathroom, and sat there staring at the blinking timer. It was like waiting for a verdict until those two lines appeared. Clear. Unmistakable. Pregnant. I stared at that plastic stick, my hands shaking, heart beating so hard I could feel it in my ears. I pressed it to my chest like it was the most fragile and powerful truth I had ever held. Dean came out of the shower just as I walked out of the bathroom. His hair was still wet, and he had a towel slung around his shoulders. I didn't say a word, I just held out the test with both hands. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then he broke into a smile that cracked his whole face open, the kind of joy that doesn't need words. "You serious?" he whispered, walking over and pulling me into his arms. "We're having a baby," I said, my voice catching. We stood there for what felt like forever, wrapped in each other, in that moment, in hope. But like most things in life, the glow faded quickly when reality set in. Dean wanted to wait before telling anyone. He said we should get through the first trimester, just in case, he added, not wanting to tempt fate. I understood, but it didn't make it easier. Because while I was holding in the greatest joy of my life, I still had to walk into family dinners with a woman who believed her son had married below his worth. Margaret Foster, Dean's mother, was the kind of woman who carried her judgment like perfume, subtle, lingering, and suffocating if you got too close. A retired literature teacher with a razor-sharp tongue, she viewed tradition not as comfort, but as currency. I was too independent, too modern, too untrained in her family's way of doing things. The first time I helped in the kitchen, she watched me peel potatoes for stew and said, "That's not how I taught Dean's exes to cook." She smiled after, but the damage was always beneath the surface. Every visit was like performing in front of an unforgiving critic. Her daughter, Eliza, didn't help either. Eliza was the poster child for passive aggression, a perfectly dressed interior designer who made backhanded compliments sound like observations. She once asked me, in front of everyone, if my dress was from a discount bin at Marshall's. I laughed it off, but Dean didn't say a word. That silence, it started to erode something inside me. At first, I thought it was just me being too sensitive. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was pregnancy hormones. But then one night, things shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. We had dinner at Margaret's again, her famous mushroom stroganoff, which Dean loved. I offered to help as usual, but she waved me off. "Just sit, Mireya. You're not really up for this kind of work anyway." I swallowed my pride and sat down, trying to keep the peace. That's when Eliza turned and said, "So when are you going to give Mom grandkids? Or is career your first baby?" I stared at her, stunned. My fingers brushed over my stomach. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream. But we hadn't told them yet. Dean had asked me to wait. So I smiled, though it burned. "Some joys are worth waiting for," I said. Eliza just laughed, like I'd told a joke without a punchline. Later that night, I told Dean I couldn't keep it in anymore. It wasn't just about the pregnancy, it was about protecting my peace. I'm not hiding our baby like it's something to be ashamed of, I said. He nodded, finally. Let's tell them this weekend. So we did. We went over for dinner again, another of Margaret's events. Eliza was there, wearing something that probably cost more than our rent. Thomas, Dean's older brother, was his usual silent self, stuck to his phone like it was oxygen. When we finished dinner, Dean reached over, took my hand, and said, "We have news." Margaret's fork paused over her pie. Eliza looked up, finally interested. "Mireya's pregnant," Dean said, voice full of pride. The silence was instant, and then deafening. Margaret blinked slowly. Eliza raised her brows like she'd smelled something sour. "That was fast," Eliza muttered. "Didn't you two say you wanted to wait a couple years?" "I guess plans change," I replied smoothly. Margaret got up from the table and walked around to stand behind me. Her voice was like ice. "Are you sure?" I turned to her, steady. "Yes. I had a blood test." "Well," she said, her smile thin, "congratulations, if that's really the case." I'll never forget that moment, how something so joyous was twisted by doubt and passive cruelty. Dean squeezed my hand, but said nothing. Not a word to defend me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept one hand over my belly, as if shielding the life inside me from the coldness I felt outside. 2 days later, Margaret texted Dean and said she wanted to host a proper celebration dinner. Dean thought it was her way of making peace. I wasn't so sure. But I agreed to go, because I wanted them to see I wouldn't shrink just because they tried to doubt me. That dinner changed everything. Not with a shout, but with a shove. And in part 2, you'll see exactly how far someone will go to keep control, even if it means endangering 2 lives to prove their twisted point. I should have trusted my gut when I saw Margaret's message. "I want to host a proper dinner to celebrate," she wrote. That's all it said. No emojis. No warmth. Just ice in digital form. And still, part of me hoped that maybe this was her way of reaching out, of starting again. Maybe Dean was right. Maybe she just needed time to adjust. But the moment we walked through her front door, I knew better. She greeted us with a tight-lipped smile and eyes that swept over my midsection like a scanner. Her first words? "Oh, that dress doesn't exactly do much to hide a baby bump, huh?" I gripped the handle of my purse tighter but smiled politely. "I chose it because it's comfortable." She turned away like I hadn't spoken at all. Dean offered to help with dinner, and she practically dragged him into the kitchen. Eliza was already there, lounging in a silk cream dress on the couch like it was a photo shoot. Thomas sat nearby, as unreadable as ever. And me? I just sat alone at the table, listening to Margaret bark orders from the kitchen like she was running a battalion instead of a dinner. When the food finally came out, corn soup and toasted bread, Margaret proudly announced it was a new recipe from a famous blogger. I forced a few sips down, but my stomach twisted from the nerves. Dean leaned in close. "Careful," he whispered. "Don't criticize anything. She'll remember it forever." I hadn't planned to criticize anything. But Margaret didn't need a reason to throw daggers. By the 3rd spoonful, she looked at me with feigned concern. "Mireya, you're eating so little. Don't you want to eat for 2? I gently wiped my mouth and set the spoon down. "I still get evening sickness," I said. "Doctor says it's common in the 1st trimester." Eliza giggled behind her wine glass. "If there even is a 1st trimester," she said under her breath, but not quiet enough to miss. I turned to her, my voice even. "What do you mean?" She gave an exaggerated shrug. "It's all happening so fast. I mean, I remember at the wedding you said you weren't ready for kids yet." Before I could respond, Margaret spoke, her voice deceptively calm. "Eliza, don't joke." Then she looked at me. Mireya, are you sure you're pregnant? Dean's hand stiffened in mine. I looked straight at her. Yes. I had a blood test last week. Margaret didn't blink. Then why didn't you bring it for me to see? I choked out a bitter laugh. I didn't know I needed to prove it. She crossed her arms and leaned back like a judge about to issue a ruling. My son is starting his own practice. This is a very sensitive time. If someone shared uncertain information and it turned out to be false, it could damage his reputation. Dean said nothing. I waited. Waited for him to speak, to defend me, to rise even an inch above his silence. He finally exhaled. Mireya, if you have the test results, maybe just show them to Mom. So everyone feels reassured. I turned to him slowly. What did you just say? I just thought, he stammered, if it helps clear things up. I laughed. Cold and sharp. Clear up what? Who exactly are you trying to reassure? Or are you doubting me too? Margaret cut in. No one's doubting you. But grown-ups should be transparent. That was it. That was the moment the dam inside me cracked. I stood up so fast my chair screeched against the floor. I don't owe anyone in this house an explanation. I don't need permission to be a mother. Eliza chuckled. Here comes the drama. I looked at each of them. Dean, still sitting. Eliza, smirking. Thomas, blank. Margaret, smug and cold. I need air, I muttered, stepping toward the door. But Margaret moved fast, cutting me off. If you walk out now, no one's going to believe a word you say. Move, I said. My voice was low, but my fury pulsed behind it. You don't understand the consequences, Mireya. If what you say is true, then proving it shouldn't be a problem. I stepped forward, ready to push past her, and then everything shattered. I felt her hand graze my arm, just a touch, maybe to stop me, maybe more. But the rug beneath me slid just enough. My foot twisted. And suddenly, I was falling. Time slowed. My stomach lurched. My back hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crack. The lights above me exploded into blinding white and then everything spun. I heard my name. Dean screaming. A chair scraping. Eliza gasping. And me, unable to breathe, unable to scream, every ounce of fear turning into a scream caught in my chest. Pain shot through my lower back and bloomed across my side like fire. And then, nothing. Darkness. When I opened my eyes, the world was white and humming. I was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped. IVs hung from silver poles. My throat was dry and raw. But I didn't care about any of it. My hands flew to my belly. My baby, I rasped. Is my baby okay? A nurse rushed in and gripped my hand. You're okay. Try to stay calm. The baby's heartbeat is strong. You made it through. I sobbed. Loud, raw, aching tears that cracked open my entire chest. 10 minutes later, a doctor named Dr. Patterson, silver-haired, steady, kind, came in and explained the damage. I had a minor concussion and bruising on my left hip, but no internal bleeding. They'd monitor me for 48 hours to be sure. But then the door opened, and Dean walked in. His face was pale. His hair disheveled. His eyes red like he'd been crying. Mireya, he breathed. I'm so sorry. I turned my head to the window. You were right there, I said. When they accused me. When I fell. You said nothing. I didn't think it would go this far, he whispered. No, I said. You just didn't think at all. And then, a burst of energy exploded into the room. Angela. My best friend. Purse on her shoulder, eyes blazing. Oh my God, she gasped. You almost gave me a heart attack. She looked at me, and then at Dean, with fire in her gaze. You really let this happen? Dean stepped back. It wasn't my fault. Then whose was it? She snapped. She just happened to fall on her own, right? I turned to Angela. My voice was a rasp. I remember the last thing Margaret said before I blacked out. She said no one would believe me. That I needed to prove it. Angela gritted her teeth. Then we prove it, Mireya. And we burn their story to the ground. And from that moment, I stopped being afraid and started fighting back. Angela didn't waste time. The moment she stepped out of the hospital room, she was on the phone. I watched her pace the hallway through the small glass window in the door. Her face was all business, jaw clenched, voice low but fiery. She wasn't just my best friend. She was a storm that knew exactly where to strike. Within an hour, she came back inside, clutching her phone like a weapon. She pulled the curtain around my bed and sat beside me. Good news, she whispered, her eyes glinting. The hospital has security cameras in the hallway outside your room. I already filed a request for the footage. Dr. Patterson's on board to testify. And guess what else? I blinked, exhausted but listening. I recorded Eliza and Margaret outside in the corridor just after your fall. My eyes widened. What? Angela nodded, pulled out her phone, and tapped play. I heard Eliza's voice, casual, like she was talking about bad weather. Just say Mom didn't mean to push her. Say Mireya slipped on her own. Then Margaret, this can't affect Dean. He just secured funding for his office. If people hear about a family scandal, it's over. Eliza, who'd believe Mireya anyway? Mom's never liked her. Just have Dean say a few words and it'll blow over. I didn't realize I was shaking until Angela took my hand. They're already building their version of the story, she said. But we're not going to let them bury yours. 1,000 emotions surged in me at once. Anger. Grief. Relief. Determination. They tried to silence me. But now I had their voices on tape. Dr. Patterson came in later that evening. Her expression was calm but direct. You're healing, she said. Your baby's heartbeat is strong. But I won't lie, you're lucky. Another inch the wrong way and the fall could have triggered early labor or worse. I swallowed hard. Can you give a written statement? Dr. Patterson gave a warm nod. Already working on it. You'll have it by tomorrow. And just like that, the tide began to turn. We spent the next few days gathering everything. Angela, who used to be a legal assistant before moving into media, knew exactly what to ask for. First, the medical records, she said. We'll use the bruising on your hip to prove it wasn't just a fall. Dr. Patterson's statement outlined everything in clear detail. The bruising didn't match a typical slip. It was consistent with external force and imbalance. Angela requested the hospital's hallway camera footage. We were granted access to a 15-minute window showing the moments before and after the fall. In the footage, you could see me walking toward the front door, Margaret moving to block me, and Dean still seated at the table. You couldn't see the exact moment I hit the floor, but what followed was damning. Margaret standing over me, not panicking, just staring. Eliza rushing in with a phone to her ear, and Dean finally running over too late. Angela pulled her laptop toward me the next day, loading it all in a single folder. This, she said, is your truth. Unfiltered. Undeniable. I nodded, my hand resting on my belly. I was still sore, still waking up in sweats at night, still afraid. But I also knew one thing with clarity I hadn't had before. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for the life inside me. Dean sent me a few messages that week. Some were apologetic. Some were empty. One even said, "You don't understand how complicated it is. She's my mom." I didn't reply. Because I didn't need to understand. I had lived it. A few days later, we met with Susan Beck, a high-profile attorney known for championing victims of family-based abuse and coercion. Her office was more like a therapy space than a legal one. Soft lighting. Calming earth tones. No suits. Just safety. I told her everything. Every insult. Every cold smile. Every moment of silence from Dean that chipped away at my confidence. She listened. Quietly. Carefully. When I finished, she asked just one question. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. Divorce. Full custody. And if possible, press charges against Margaret. Susan's lips curled into a slow, approving smile. Good. You're not here to beg. You're here to claim. We moved quickly. Papers were filed. Evidence logged. Witnesses contacted. Dr. Patterson agreed to testify. The hospital footage was submitted as visual support. Margaret was served at her home a week later. Eliza apparently called Dean in a panic. And Dean? He still hadn't shown his face. Angela helped me move into her apartment on the edge of Portland. She gave me the master bedroom without blinking and set up a cozy reading corner where I could sit and talk to my baby every morning. I would rest one hand on my belly and whisper, "You're real. You're strong. And no matter what happens, you are wanted. You are loved." One night, Angela came home with takeout and an idea. "You know what we should do," she said. "When this is all over, we start something. A business. A way to help other women like you." I looked at her, confused. Like me? Women who've been pushed down and told to stay silent. Women who know the truth but need someone to help them speak it loud. A marketing firm. You've got the strategy skills. I've got the media background. Let's build something. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, really smiled. "I like that," I whispered. Beacon voices. Angela clapped. Exactly. A light. A megaphone. A way back. But first, I had to finish what was already in motion. The court hearing was scheduled for mid-May. I spent every day leading up to it reminding myself of two things. I was a mother. And I was not afraid anymore. The day of the hearing arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging low over Portland. It wasn't raining, but the air was thick, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Angela and I arrived early. She carried our evidence folder like it was sacred scripture, while I clutched a copy of my hospital report, my hand shaking slightly despite everything we had prepared. The courthouse lobby was colder than I expected, its marble floors polished to the point of cruelty. I kept my coat wrapped tightly around me, one hand on my small but growing belly. "My daughter. My little fighter. You okay?" Angela whispered. I nodded. As okay as I need to be. Susan Beck arrived shortly after, calm and focused as ever. She gave me a nod of encouragement and didn't waste time. "The judge assigned to our case is firm but fair," she said. "We'll let the evidence speak. They won't be able to deny this." At exactly 10 a.m., we stepped into courtroom 4. And there she was. Margaret Foster sat at the defendant's table in a stone-gray suit that matched her demeanor. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her hands folded in front of her like she was at a book club rather than standing trial for endangering a pregnant woman. Eliza sat beside her, face tight, lips drawn into a line. Their lawyer, someone I recognized from the tabloids, had a sharp jawline and the kind of voice that probably made juries lean in. "Dean?" He sat alone in the back row, behind his family, his eyes downcast, his suit slightly wrinkled. He didn't look up. The judge entered, a woman with cropped silver hair and the air of someone who'd seen every kind of lie. She didn't smile. Just opened the folder and began. "This is the hearing in the matter of Mireya Cruz versus Margaret Foster, regarding charges of intentional physical harm, risk to an unborn child, and subsequent emotional distress. We will also address the divorce and custody petition. Susan stood. She didn't posture. Didn't raise her voice. She just told the truth. Your Honor, my client was 8 weeks pregnant when she was pushed by the defendant. The fall resulted in a hospital stay, a concussion, and a potential threat to the fetus. We have medical records, a signed statement from her physician, hallway footage from the hospital, and, most critically, an audio recording between the defendant and her daughter. Susan played the tape. You could hear a pin drop when Margaret's voice echoed through the speakers. This can't affect Dean. He just secured funding for his office. Then Eliza, just say Mireya slipped on her own. I watched the judge's face, it's impassive, but her eyes had narrowed. Margaret's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Eliza's knuckles went white. Next, Dr. Patterson took the stand. Her testimony was clean, professional, and devastating. The injuries do not support a simple fall. The bruising and concussion strongly suggest that the patient was pushed or jolted unexpectedly, resulting in a backward fall onto a hardwood surface. Given the stage of her pregnancy, this fall posed significant risk to both her and the fetus. Margaret's lawyer finally stood. Your Honor, this was a tragic accident. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships are often emotionally charged. There's no clear footage of the incident. And while we understand the plaintiff's pain, there is no concrete evidence that my client deliberately pushed her. Susan rose again. We don't need to rely on assumptions. The recording shows intent to construct a false narrative. The medical report shows trauma inconsistent with a mere slip. And the defendant's behavior following the incident, standing silently as Mireya lay injured, shows a pattern of indifference at best, hostility at worst. The judge didn't ask for clarification. She simply nodded and said, I will now review the evidence. The next hour dragged like a lifetime. Dean still hadn't spoken. He hadn't even looked at me. When the judge returned, the room was still and silent. She looked directly at Margaret. Mrs. Foster, the court finds that you acted willfully and recklessly, resulting in physical harm to a pregnant woman. The combination of circumstantial and direct evidence, including the audio recording and the physician's testimony, is more than sufficient. She turned to me. Mrs. Mireya Cruz, your divorce is granted. You are awarded full custody of the child upon birth. I couldn't breathe. But I wasn't done listening. The judge looked back at Margaret. You are to pay $700,000 in damages for emotional distress, medical expenses, and reputational harm. Furthermore, you are to have no contact with Mireya or the child unless approved by court order. Margaret didn't flinch. But Eliza broke. Her composure cracked, and I saw her lip tremble as she whispered something I couldn't hear. Then came the final blow. Mrs. Foster, the judge said, I am also recommending criminal investigation into the incident. This court believes further legal action may be warranted. And just like that, the woman who thought she controlled every room she walked into was no longer in control of anything. Court adjourned. Dean stood, his hands trembling at his sides. He stepped forward. Mireya, he began, voice hoarse. I didn't know what to say. I froze. I held up my hand. You had so many chances. But silence was a choice. And now, it's one you have to live with. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I had finally exhaled after months of holding my breath. Angela slipped her arm around my shoulder as the sun pierced through the clouds for the first time all day. Justice hadn't just spoken. It had shouted. I didn't cry when I left the courthouse. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse in relief. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, holding my coat closed with one hand and pressing the other over the small swell of my belly. It was quiet inside me, the kind of quiet that comes only after the storm has passed but before you realize just how much has changed. Angela walked beside me. We didn't say much until we got to her car. She unlocked the doors and looked at me for a long moment. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I said. "We did." She reached over and hugged me. No words. No noise. Just strength passing from her body to mine. That hug meant more to me than any verdict, any dollar amount, any courtroom declaration. I was free. And that meant everything. That night, I sat on the little balcony of Angela's apartment with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The Portland skyline was faintly glowing, and the night air was cool but kind. I looked out over the city, hand on my stomach, whispering to the child growing inside me. "I protected you," I murmured. "I told them you were real. I told them you mattered." A tiny kick fluttered low in my belly, a faint, magical thump. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't alone anymore. The following week was a blur of headlines. Mother-in-law sued for endangering pregnant woman. Daughter-in-law wins $700,000 in emotional distress case. But the worst for them came when the audio leaked. Someone in the courthouse, maybe a clerk, maybe a reporter who pulled strings, got a copy of the courtroom audio and sent it to a local podcast. Within days, it had gone viral. People were outraged. Comment sections flooded with support for the pregnant woman who stood up for herself and anger at the callousness of Margaret's voice. Eliza's snide remarks were clipped into TikToks. Think pieces were written. Mothers across the country reposted the story. Dean didn't call me. But I heard through mutual friends that he stepped down from his law office. He left Portland soon after, moving to Colorado, trying to start over. He never apologized. Not really. A voicemail came once, months later. It said, "I hope you're okay. I wasn't strong enough. I'm sorry." I never called back. That was a different life. 3 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. I named her Ruby, not because it was trendy or because I saw it on some name list, but because that's what she felt like. A gem. Something forged under pressure, unbreakable. Angela was there in the delivery room. She held my hand through the contractions. She cut the umbilical cord. And when the nurse handed Ruby to me for the first time, I cried for the first time since that fall. Not because of pain. Because of healing. I didn't return to my corporate job. I couldn't. The thought of walking into an office where I had to swallow my voice again made my stomach twist. I needed more. I needed freedom. Autonomy. Angela and I took the money I won in the lawsuit and founded Beacon Voices, a small marketing and storytelling agency focused on helping women speak out after trauma. Whether they needed campaign support, PR advice, or simply a platform to be heard, we gave them light. Our first client was a woman who had been fired after reporting her manager's misconduct. She'd been sleeping in her car. We helped her build a campaign, connect with nonprofits, and within 3 months, she was hired to lead a youth center for at-risk girls. I didn't just find my voice through Beacon Voices. I helped others rediscover theirs. Angela moved into the same neighborhood as me, and Ruby called her Auntie G. Every Friday night, we had dinner on my patio, just the 3 of us laughing, catching up, chasing Ruby around with plates of pasta. Every now and then, I'd feel the old fear crawl back. The memory of Margaret's hand reaching out. The doubt in Dean's eyes. The coldness of that house. But I'd look at Ruby, her wild brown curls, her loud, fearless laugh, and remember why I did it all. One morning, as I was packing Ruby's diaper bag for daycare, she waddled over to me and said something that stopped me cold. "Mommy strong." I looked at her, surprised. "What did you say?" She giggled and pointed at my arm. "Mommy strong like superhero." Tears welled in my eyes. She didn't even know the half of it. I knelt down, pulled her into my arms, and whispered in her ear. "No, baby. You made me strong. Sometimes the biggest victories don't come with applause. They come with quiet mornings, a child's laughter echoing down the hall, the smell of pancakes in the air, the soft weight of peace settling where pain used to live. It had been over a year since the fall. Since that courtroom. Since Margaret Foster was sentenced to 2 years in prison for intentional assault and endangering a pregnant woman. I never saw her again after that day. She didn't write. Didn't ask for forgiveness. And I didn't need her to. Her absence was the loudest apology I'd ever received. Eliza moved to Florida not long after the trial. Her design business took a nosedive when the audio clip made the rounds online. Brands didn't want to be associated with her name, and clients pulled their accounts. I heard she rebranded under a different last name, but the internet never forgets. Dean tried to contact me again through our lawyers after Ruby was born. He sent a letter this time. Handwritten. Sloppy. Unsure. I think about that day all the time. I failed you. I failed her. I just wanted to say, if you ever decide Ruby wants to know me, I'd like to be a better man for her. For both of you. I didn't respond. I wasn't being cruel, just honest. Some bridges shouldn't be rebuilt. Especially the ones set on fire by silence. Beacon Voices had grown. What started as a dream over takeout boxes and a hospital bed had turned into a full-fledged agency. We had clients from across the country now, women who'd survived betrayal, abuse, abandonment, all of them ready to reclaim their stories. One of our clients was a woman named Sienna. She'd been manipulated by her partner into signing over her family home, then kicked out once he sold it. No one believed her, until we crafted a campaign that brought her story to light. Her community rallied. Donations poured in. She now runs a transitional housing shelter for single mothers. I remember sitting with her after one of her events, watching her speak to a group of teens. She turned to me and said, "I didn't think my voice mattered until someone handed me a mic." I smiled. Sometimes we have to build our own mic. And sometimes we just are the mic. I couldn't help but think how different things might have been for me if someone had handed me a mic that night in Margaret's house, when I was being interrogated like a criminal for carrying my own child. But that's the thing about women like us. We don't wait to be handed anything. We build it. With fire in our lungs and truth in our bones. One night, Ruby came into my room after a nightmare. She was almost 3 now, talkative, curious, and stubborn in all the ways that made me laugh and cry. She climbed into my bed and curled into my side. "Mommy?" "Yes, love?" "Are you sad?" I paused. "No, baby." "Why do you ask?" "Sometimes you look like you remember bad stuff." She was too young to understand the complexity of trauma, how it lingers even after justice, how it lives in the edges of quiet. But I nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes I remember things that hurt. But then I look at you, and I feel better again." She gave a sleepy smile. "I make your heart happy?" "You make my heart whole." I held her long after she fell asleep. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt grateful. Not for what happened, never for that, but for who I became because of it. Because of them, I learned what silence cost me. Because of Angela, I learned how to speak again. And because of Ruby, I learned that protecting someone is the most powerful form of love there is. I received a letter in the mail a few weeks later, an official document stamped with the state seal. Margaret Foster had been released early due to good behavior. I stared at the letter, let it sit in my hands for a long time. There was no return address. No letter inside. Just a sterile statement that she was out. Angela noticed my silence that evening and sat beside me. "She can't hurt you anymore," she said. "I know," I whispered. "But I also know women like her don't change. They retreat. They plot." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Then we stay ready." I nodded. We weren't afraid. Not anymore. We were prepared. I filed a no-contact order immediately. Just in case. And then I let it go. She no longer lived rent-free in my head. She didn't get to own my story, my peace, or my child's future. Margaret could rot in her own regrets. I had better things to build. 3 years had passed since the fall. 3 years since Margaret's cold stare hovered above me as I lay on that floor, unsure if my baby would survive. Now, the house was filled with laughter. Not Margaret's sharp laughter. Not Eliza's smug giggle. This was Ruby's world now, her squeals echoing across the yard, ribbons of joy tied to every giggle. I watched her from the kitchen window, a blur of curls and purple overalls, chasing soap bubbles Angela blew from the porch. A purple balloon bobbed behind her, her favorite color since the day she learned to say the word. Faster, Auntie G. Faster. Ruby shouted. Angela obliged, laughing so hard she nearly lost control of the bubble wand. Today was Ruby's birthday. Her 4th. And this home, this little white house on the edge of Portland with daisy planters and chalk drawings on the steps, it was mine. Every inch of it. Purchased with the money Margaret thought would silence me, now transformed into a sanctuary where joy was louder than fear. The doorbell rang. I wiped frosting off my fingers, opened the door, and saw Sienna, one of our first clients at Beacon Voices, holding a tray of chocolate cupcakes. She said she wanted double chocolate, Sienna smirked. Who was I to say no? Ruby ran up and hugged her around the knees. Thank you, Miss Sienna. As I welcomed more guests, women we'd worked with, mothers and survivors and truth-tellers, I looked around and realized. These weren't just friends. They were warriors. Women who had taken back their names, their voices, their lives. Women who had been dismissed, doubted, shamed. Now, they were business owners, advocates, and some were even mentors within our agency. Beacon Voices had become more than I ever imagined. It wasn't just a company. It was a movement. And it was all born out of the moment they tried to silence me. I stood in the middle of the party, holding a lemonade, watching Ruby twirl with her friends under strings of fairy lights, and thought about the arc of it all, how pain can be the beginning of power, how sometimes, falling isn't the end, but the start of standing taller than ever before. Later that night, after the last balloon was popped and the last crumb swept up, I tucked Ruby into bed. She hugged her purple stuffed bunny and looked up at me. Mommy, she whispered. Yes, baby? Was Grandma Margaret mean? It came out of nowhere. I froze. She didn't know the story. Not yet. Only pieces. Fragments. I knelt beside her, heart beating slow and steady. Yes, I said honestly. She didn't believe in me. Or in you. Ruby frowned. That's not nice. No, it's not, I said. But I learned how to protect you. And now, you're safe. And strong. She nodded and yawned. You're strong too. Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them back. I kissed her forehead. I love you. I love you more, she whispered, already slipping into sleep. I stayed beside her for a while, watching her chest rise and fall. Every breath she took was proof that I had done something right. That I had refused to surrender to silence. That I had become the woman I needed to be, for both of us. Months later, I received a message through our agency's contact form. No name. No return phone. Just text. I saw your story. I didn't believe her back then. I should have. I'm sorry. It didn't take much to know it was from Dean. I read it twice. Then closed the tab. Some truths didn't need responses. Some doors weren't meant to be reopened. Dean had made his choice. I made mine. And every morning I woke up to my daughter's laughter and the soft sound of healing. I knew I chose right. The final step of my journey came quietly, not with revenge, but with peace. I visited my old self sometimes in memories. The version of me who stood in Margaret's kitchen, hands trembling, heart full of life and fear. I wanted to reach back in time and whisper, "You are enough." They won't believe you, but it doesn't matter. You know the truth. And soon, they will too. Because the truth always rises. It doesn't matter how many people try to bury it. It doesn't matter how loud the lies become. The truth waits. And when it rises, it doesn't ask permission. It just is. So here I am. Mother. Founder. Survivor. And more than anything, free. Welcome to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. If you've made it this far, thank you. And remember this. Strength isn't found in perfection. It's found in the moments you decide you won't be silenced, even when you stand alone. And if you've ever been pushed down, doubted, or dismissed, let this story be your reminder. Get up. Speak up. Rise. Your voice is the beginning of someone else's courage. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've lived through something like this, or are still walking through it, know that your story matters. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more true-to-life tales of betrayal, justice, and the quiet, steady power of survival.